Hello and welcome to Intrigue News, where we bring you breaking news and up-to-the-minute news. Today we're going to be talking about international destinations that are reopening for tourists during this global pandemic. Although most governments are still against non-essential international travel, a host of popular destinations are beginning to ease their COVID-19 lockdown measures and border restrictions and are moving toward welcoming tourists back. Earlier this month, the European Union unveiled an action plan to reopen its internal borders in time for summer, while countries such as Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania have formed travel bubbles, lifting restrictions for each other's citizens. A number of Caribbean islands are preparing to open their doors to foreign visitors in June, while destinations such as Mexico and Thailand are planning to open up again, region by region, in the coming weeks. If you're one of many travellers eagerly awaiting news on where you can travel to this year, here's a guide to the top destinations making plans to reopen, as well as some of those that are keeping their borders firmly closed for now. Cyprus. Cyprus is so keen to get its tourism industry back on track, officials are offering to cover the costs of any travellers who test positive for COVID-19 while on vacation in the Mediterranean island nation. According to a letter shared with CNN, the Cypriot government will pay for lodging as well as food, drink and medication for tourists who are taken ill with coronavirus during their visit. The detailed plan was set out in a 5-page letter issued to governments, airlines and tour operators on May 26th. Officials have also earmarked a 100-bed hospital for foreign travellers who test positive, while a 500-room quarantine hotel will be available to patients, family and close contacts. The traveller will only need to bear the cost of their airport transfer and repatriation flight in collaboration with their agent and or airline, states the letter. The news came shortly after Cyprus Transport Ministers Yannis Kourousis announced hotels in the country will reopen on June 1st, while international air travel will restart on June 9th. Once the destination reopens, visitors from only chosen countries will be allowed to enter. Officials have issued a list of countries to be granted access to Cyprus in 2 separate stages. Incoming flights from Greece, Malta, Bulgaria, Norway, Austria, Finland, Slovenia, Hungary, Israel, Denmark, Germany, Slovakia and Lithuania will be authorised first. From June 20th, Cyprus will also permit incoming flights from Switzerland, Poland, Romania, Croatia, Estonia and the Czech Republic. The UK and the US, both listed among the nations with the highest number of confirmed COVID-19 deaths, are noticeably absent. However, the list is to be expanded to include further countries in the coming months. Travellers heading to Cyprus will need to provide a valid certificate proving they tested negative for COVID-19, but they'll be subject to temperature checks on arrival as well as testing at random during the course of their trip. The destination has already put measures in place to protect travellers and residents, such as ensuring hotel staff wear masks and gloves, regularly disinfecting sunbeds and keeping tables at restaurants, bars, cafes and pubs at least 2 metres apart. Tourism accounts for at least 15% of Cyprus's economy. Bali. Bali has also been successful in containing its coronavirus outbreak with less than 350 confirmed cases and, at the time of writing, the time of talking about this, total of 4 deaths. The Indonesian island now hopes to welcome tourists back by October, provided its infection rates stay low. According to a statement from Ni Wayangiri Andriani, Secretary of the Ministry of Yogyakarta, situated on the island of Java, is likely to reopen first along with the Riau Islands province. Bali's economy is hugely dependent on tourism and visitor numbers have been rising in recent years, with around 6.3 million people visiting in 2019. The coronavirus has collapsed the Balinese economy. It's been a steep drop since mid-March when social distancing measures were put in place. Mangu Nyaman Kandia and Bali tour guide told ABC News in April, "No tourists, no money." All foreign nationals except for diplomats, permanent residents and humanitarian workers are currently banned from Indonesia. Yet anyone entering the island must undergo a swab test and provide a letter stating they are free of COVID-19. It's unclear what the entry requirements will be if restrictions are lifted later this year, or whether Bali will accept travellers from regions badly affected by the pandemic. However, tourism officials have been calling for a travel bubble to be implemented between Bali and Australia. Thailand. Thailand has long been among the top destinations for travellers, receiving close to 40 million foreign tourists last year. However, visitors have been banned from entering the Southeast Asian country since March because of the pandemic. While the number of cases have been relatively low in comparison to other destinations, Thailand has reported more than 3,000 confirmed cases and over 50 deaths. Officials are taking any chances when it comes to reopening the country. It is still dependent on the outbreak situation, but I think the earliest we may see the return of the tourists could be the 4th quarter of this year. The Governor of Tourism Authority of Thailand told CNN Travel. The governor went on to stress there will be limitations on who can visit the country and what the regions they can go to once restrictions are relaxed. We are not going to open all at once, he added. We are still on high alert. We just can't let our guards down yet. We have to look at the country or origin of the travellers to see if the situation has truly improved. This effectively means Thailand is unlikely to open its borders to travellers from destinations that don't appear to have the coronavirus situation under control. Those that are given permission to enter may be offered long-stay packages in isolated areas where health monitoring can easily be controlled, such as the remote islands of Koh, Pha Ngan and Koh Samui. However, Thailand's borders are firmly shut for the time being. The ban on incoming international commercial flights, excluding repatriation flights, was recently extended until June 30th, and Phuket International Airport remains closed. As a result, the TAT estimates that visitor numbers will drop to 14 to 16 million this year. Like many other global destinations, Thailand is currently focusing on domestic tourism. In fact, some resorts and hotels have already been given the go-ahead to open. Hua Hin, located about 200 kilometres south of Bangkok, being one of them. Shopping malls, museums, markets and some tourist attractions have also been reopening their doors, with Bangkok's Grand Palace due to reopen on June 4th. France was one of the most visited countries in the world before the coronavirus pandemic. Now, like the rest of the EU, restrictions are currently in place on all non-essential travel from outside the Schengen zone, a grouping of 26 countries which normally have open borders. Travellers who do enter the country, with the exception of EU citizens or arrivals from the UK, will be subject to a compulsory 14-day coronavirus quarantine until at least July 24th. Although the government is slowly lifting lockdown measures, with car journeys of up to 100 kilometres now allowed and beaches beginning to reopen, officials have made it clear the country is in no hurry to ease border restrictions for international travellers. Since the start of the crisis, the closure of the borders is the rule and the authorisation to cross a border is the exception. We have to keep this protection in place. This will not change soon, French Interior Minister Christophe Castaing said during a televised news conference earlier this month. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe recently announced a $19.4 billion stimulus package to boost its ailing tourism sector. What is good for tourism is often good for France. What strikes tourism strikes France, he said during a news conference. Although some businesses have been given permission to reopen, the country's hotels, bars, restaurants and cafes are to remain closed at least until June 2nd. Even then, it's unlikely establishments in Paris, which has been marked as a coronavirus red zone by officials, will be allowed to open anytime soon. It is announced on May 29th the country's most visited museum, the Louvre, will reopen on July 6th. Tourism is facing what is probably its worst challenge in modern history, added Philippe, because this is one of the crown jewels of the French economy, rescuing its national priority. He went on to state that residents can take holidays within France during July and August. The country's hotels will be reliant on domestic tourism once they do reopen, as all signs suggest international travellers will not be able to enter for the foreseeable future. When the lockdown measures soften, French tourists are likely to want to stay close to home in the short term. A spokesperson for French hotel chain Accor told CNN Travel earlier this month, it will be the moment for them to rediscover their own country and we will be able to welcome them. Greece. Greece tourism accounts for almost 20% of Greece's gross domestic product, as well as 1 in 5 jobs, so it's perhaps no surprise that the Mediterranean nation is angling to reopen tourists as soon as possible. The European country, which managed to keep its coronavirus case numbers very low by implementing a strict lockdown early on, plans to allow travellers back in on June 15th. The tourism period begins on June 15th, when seasonal hotels can reopen, Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis announced on May 20th. Let us make this summer the epilogue of the crisis, he added. Mr. Takis went on to state that direct international flights to Greek destinations will slowly resume from July 1st, and tourists will no longer be expected to take a COVID-19 test or go into quarantine on arrival. However, Tourism Minister Haris Theodorakis has indicated health officials will conduct spot tests when necessary. The tourism experience this summer may be slightly different from what you've had in previous years, Mr. Takis told CNN earlier this month. Maybe no bars may be open or no tight crowds, but you can still get a fantastic experience in Greece, provided that the global epidemic is on a downward path. Greece resumed regularly ferry services to its islands on May 25th, while travel restrictions within the country were lifted on May 18th, allowing movement from one prefecture to another. Apart from the islands, bars and restaurants have also been allowed to take up business again, while city hotels are scheduled to reopen on June 1st, followed by seasonal hotels in July. All international passengers had previously been required to take a COVID-19 test upon arrival or go into quarantine for 14 days. Mr. Takis had suggested tourists would be required to undergo testing before their visit as a further precaution in the future, but it seems this is no longer the case. So now we have Germany. Germany, although non-essential travel to Germany is prohibited at present, the land of poets and thinkers intends to lift restrictions for EU countries from June 15th, according to German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas. Officials are also considering allowing entry to visitors from Turkey, the UK, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway and Switzerland, although a final decision is yet to be made. The proposal was listed in a paper called Criteria for the Enabling of Intra-European Tourism, which suggested the current travel warnings would be replaced by individual travel advice relating to each country. The revitalisation of tourism is important for both travellers and the German travel industry, as well as for the economic stability of the respective target countries, it reads. The Austria-Germany land border is also reopening. Travel between Austria and Germany will be possible from June 15th, and restrictions around the country are being relaxed. While bars are still closed, restaurants began reopening on May 18th, while hotels were permitted to open up again from May 29th. Chancellor Angela Merkel has opted to extend social distancing rules until June 29th. And next we have Mexico. Mexico is aiming to welcome visitors back within weeks. While the nation remains in lockdown, with hotels and restaurants yet to recommence business, officials are planning to reopen the country bit by bit in order to get things back on track. The plan for the country is to open in stages by regions, WTTC CEO Gloria Guevara told CNN Travel recently. The target is domestic travellers first, followed by travellers from the US and Canada, and then the rest of the world. The border between the US and Mexico border is closed to non-essential travel until at least June 22nd, and most international flights in and out of Mexico's key airports are currently suspended or significantly reduced. However, Delta Airlines will be increasing and or resuming various services from the US to Cancun, Mexico City, Los Cabos and Puerto Vallarta in the coming weeks. Quintana Roo, an estate on the Caribbean side of Mexico that's home to the likes of Cancun, Playa del Carmen and Tulum, hopes to reopen in mid-June, according to Marisol Venegas, the state's tourism secretary. We want to revive tourism and expect to start opening sites and hotels sometime between June 10 and June 15, but don't know which ones yet, she says. It depends on what the federal government allows us to do. Meanwhile, Los Cabos will kick off all 5-phase plan to revive tourism in June. Rodrigo Esponda, managing director of the Los Cabos Tourism Board, says he hopes to be able to accept both international and domestic travellers by August and September. However, beach destination Riviera Nayarit, situated north of Puerto Vallarta, currently has no immediate plans to bring back tourists, according to Richard Zarkin, the public relations manager of the Riviera Nayarit Convention and Visitors Bureau. Next, we have Turkey. Turkey has made over $34.5 billion from tourism in 2019, and the transcontinental country is eager to get back in business. According to Tourism Minister Mehmet Nuri Ersoy, the destination plans to restart domestic tourism by the close of May and hopes to receive international visitors from mid-June. During an interview with Turkish news channel NTV, Ersoy indicated that Turkey may reopen to Asian countries such as China and South Korea first. The country has set out new guidelines for its hotels and resort facilities, such as temperature checks at entrances and at least 12 hours of room ventilation after checkout. Guests will be required to wear face masks and maintain social distancing. The more transparent and detailed information we give, the more we will earn the confidence of tourists. Tourism Minister Mehmet Ersoy told Reuters earlier this month are revealing plans to open around half of Turkey's hotels this year. Meanwhile, restrictions on intercity travel have been lifted, while restaurants, cafes, parks and sports facilities are permitted to reopen from June 1st, along with beaches and museums. Istanbul's Grand Bazaar, one of the world's largest markets, is also preparing to reopen for the first time in 2 months on June 1st. Italy is dropping its compulsory quarantine for arrivals in calculated risk to entice tourists back. Italy has been one of the destinations worst hit by the pandemic, but the hugely popular European country is keen to get its tourist industry up and running now that infection rates have slowed down. Travellers from EU, along with the UK and the microstates and principalities of Andorra, Monaco, San Marino and the Vatican, will be allowed to enter without having to go into quarantine starting June 3rd. In a move the government has described as a calculated risk. We're facing a calculated risk in the knowledge that the contagion curve may rise again, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte said in a televised address to the nation earlier this month. We have to accept it, otherwise we will never be able to start up again. Visitors were previously required to undergo a 2-week quarantine before being allowed entry. All museums, including Rome's Vatican museums, have been slowly reopening throughout May with strict social distancing rules. Bars and restaurants were permitted to reopen with reduced numbers of diners as well as plastic shields to divide customers on May 18th. St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican also opened its doors again on May 18th after being closed for over 2 months, while Venice Simple and Orient Express is scheduled to return to railways on July 8th. Meanwhile, the Italian island of Sicily has brought in a scheme to attract travellers back with subsidised holidays for domestic and international visitors available. And in Spain, Spain's lockdown was one of the toughest in Europe, but restrictions are gently being lifted. Beaches are set to reopen in June, while hotels in some parts of the country have already been permitted to resume business. From July 1st, the European destination, which welcomed a record 84 million visitors in 2019, will grant EU travellers permission to enter without having to quarantine for 2 weeks. Come July, will allow the arrival of foreign tourists to Spain under safe conditions, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said at a recent news conference. We will guarantee that tourists are not at risk, and they don't represent a risk to Spain. While there's been little mention of opening borders to travellers beyond the EU, it's thought Spain is hoping to follow the lead of destinations such as Lithuania and the Czech Republic by establishing safe corridors or a travel bubble, with nearby destinations that have managed to keep the outbreak under control. We have to guarantee when international tourism opens that the person who comes to Spain is a safe person. Spanish Tourism Minister Reyes Moroto recently told local newspaper El País. The issue of borders will be accompanied by the evolution of the health crisis. At present, it's mandatory for anyone 6 and older to wear face masks, or in public, both indoors and outdoors, where it is not possible to maintain an interpersonal distance. And next we have the Maldives. The Maldives is already one of the most lavish destinations in the world, but the Maldives looks set to become even more expensive to visit once it reopens. The island nation, made up of over 1,000 islands, closed its national borders and cancelled all flights shortly after recording its first 2 coronavirus cases in March. However, around 30 resorts have stayed open, with tourists opting to self-isolate in the famous honeymoon destination rather than return home. The Maldives have recorded around 1,457 confirmed cases and 5 deaths from COVID-19 so far. According to Minister of Tourism Ali Wahid, the country could be in the position to receive tourists by the end of 2020. Within the next 3 months, the Maldives will become the first COVID-19 free country in Asia region. Hopefully, during an online Maldivian Parliament meeting, we are conducting surveys to begin safe tourism when we reach that road. A phased reopening has been proposed that would see private jets and super yachts allowed entry from June 1st. Charter flights and private jets will be charged a $50,000 landing fee. The government has also issued a safe tourism licence for tourist facilities that comply with government legislation and certain safety requirements, such as having a certified medic readily available and holding an adequate stock of PPE equipment. Travellers who made the trip will need to have a confirmed booking with a tourist facility with a safe tourism licence, as well as a special $100 tourist visa available to those committed to spending a minimum of 14 days in the country. Visitors will also need to present a valid medical certificate confirming they are COVID-19 free. The Maldives received more than 1.7 million visitors in 2019 and been expected numbers to rise to 2 million in 2020. And next we have St. Lucia. St. Lucia will begin its phased reopening on June the 4th. St. Lucia is one of the several Caribbean islands trying for a tourist comeback. The tropical destination, which closed its doors to foreign travellers on March 23rd, is to begin its phased reopening on June 4th, when it will lift borders to visitors from the United States. Those travelling to the country must present certified proof of a negative COVID-19 test taken within 48 hours of boarding their flight. Visitors will also be subject to screening and temperature checks by port health authorities and must wear face masks and maintain social distancing during their visit. Officials are also bringing in new safety measures for taxis to separate drivers and passengers. Our new protocols have been carefully crafted and will build confidence among travellers and our citizens, Minister of Tourism Dominic Fedi said in a statement. The government of St. Lucia remains resolved to protect both lives and livelihoods as it jump-starts its economy. Local businesses have also been allowed to reopen, provided they have appropriate cleaning measures and social distancing measures in place. Details of the second phase of the island's reopening, which is to begin on August 1st, will be announced in coming weeks. So next we have Portugal. Portugal is still in the process of relaxing lockdown restrictions, allowing restaurants, museums and coffee shops to reopen at reduced capacity from mid-May. But the European country is keen to revive its struggling tourism industry, with Foreign Minister August Augusto Santos Silva recently declaring tourists are welcome. While visitors from outside the EU are banned until at least June 15th, some routes in and out of Portuguese-speaking nations such as Brazil are still operating. The land border between Portugal and Spain, which has been closed to tourists since March, is unlikely to reopen until EU travel restrictions are totally lifted. We are gradually going to start looking at easing border controls, Internal Affairs Minister Eduardo Cabrita said earlier this month. Although the prospect of reopening to international tourists appears to be a little while off, officials are putting measures in place to ensure foreign travellers will feel confident to return once they are able to. Rita Marquez, the country's Secretary of State for Tourism, has launched a Don't Cancel Postpone scheme, allowing tourists to reschedule any pre-arranged holidays to Portugal until the close of 2021. This is valid for all bookings made through accredited travel agencies, along with hotels or Airbnbs or trips scheduled between March 13th and September 30th, 2020. In addition, National Tourism Authority Turismo de Portugal has created a free hygiene certification stamp to distinguish clean and safe tourism enterprise. To increase visitors' confidence, businesses will have to comply with hygiene and cleaning requirements for the prevention and control of COVID-19 to receive the stamp, which is valid for 1 year. According to Santos Silva's, Portugal's airports will soon be introducing health checks for arrivals, but visitors will not be subject to a mandatory quarantine. And next we have Aruba. Aruba has issued tentative reopening dates which will fall between June 15th and July 1st. The Caribbean island of Aruba is planning to open its doors to travellers once again at some point between June 15th and July 1st. However, the Visitors Bureau for the Caribbean island, which has reported just over 100 confirmed coronavirus cases, says the tentative date may change if Aruba opts to consider additional precautionary measures as needed. Although there is no mention of any COVID-19 test requirements for arrivals, tourists will be required to undergo temperature checks on arrival, while non-essential business includes shopping malls, cinemas, beauty salons and outdoor restaurants were allowed to reopen on May 25th. The island's country's 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew remains in place. This means such establishments are required to close by 10 p.m. every day. In addition, the Department of Public Health has introduced the Aruba Health and Happiness Code, a mandatory cleaning and hygiene certification program for all businesses related to tourism in the country. Next up we have Georgia. Georgia aims to welcome back international travellers from July 1st. Georgia was experiencing a tourism boom before the coronavirus pandemic, with 5 million travellers visiting in 2019, a 7% increase on the previous year. But the country was forced to close its winter resorts and place a ban on all foreign visitors back in March because of the crisis. Eager to revive its tourism sector, the country's government says it plans to reopen to international travellers on July the 1st. Officials have brought in a 3-stage anti-crisis plan, which includes a marketing campaign designed to promote Georgia as a safe destination. The next stage will allow for domestic travel in special safe tourism zones, while the final stage involves reopening borders and resuming some flights. We are transitioning to the third stage of COVID-19 response, which means post-crisis management of the economy and devising plans on how to kickstart different sectors. Prime Minister Georgi Gakaria said at a recent council meeting focused on fighting COVID-19, the tourism sector will be first to which emergency relief measures will apply, while other destinations are relaxing their travel restrictions and bringing in measures to lure travellers back. So next up we have the UK. While other destinations are relaxing travel restrictions and bringing measures to lure travellers back, the UK is choosing to enact stricter regulations. Despite previously opting against a mandatory quarantine for travellers, the government recently announced that as of June 8th, all arriving travellers will be required to self-isolate for a 14-day period. Under the new rules, all arrivals will have to provide an address at which they must remain for 2 weeks. Those who break the rules will be subject to a fine of up to £1,218. The decision is to be reviewed every 3 weeks, has quashed any hopes of rescuing international tourism here in the coming weeks. It is thought the move may discourage airlines from restarting flight operations swiftly, while officials have warned there's little chance of UK residents being able to go abroad this summer. I'm saying right now you can't travel abroad, Transport Minister Grant Shapps said during a BBC television interview when asked whether UK citizens should book flights in July. If you are booking it, you are clearly by very nature taking a chance of where the direction of the virus goes and therefore where the travel advice is in the future. Around 9 out of 10 flights have been grounded since the UK went into lockdown. At present, hotels are primed to open in early July, but as EU border restrictions are still in place, it is likely the UK will be focusing on domestic travel for now. Luxury country house hotel Beaverbrook is one of the many establishments eagerly waiting to be given them the go-ahead to open their doors again while implementing major changes to protect guests and staff. We're still awaiting further clarity from the government on when the hotel can reopen, but we have been working behind the scenes to adapt our operations to ensure extra safety for both our staff and guests when we do. A spokesperson from the Surrey Hotel told CNN Travel earlier this month all visitors and staff will be required to submit a temperature check on arrival and be asked to sanitise their hands when entering all buildings on the estate. Thank you for watching Intrigue News, where we provide you with breaking news and up-to-the-minute global news. Please do subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified when we do post up videos. Thank you.